dia a todos, todas e todes.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I am Fabiana Algarte. I will be the moderator of the employment for people LGBT. I am a white man, dark hair, red beard. I'm wearing glasses, taking a gray blouse and a pink blouse, and behind me I have a purple wall and BU as a flag, written another sign with the flag of the LGBT population and some pictures. We are here in this forum on the second forum of the rights LGBTQ2 plus, an initiative of the Canadian government, representations of Chile and Brazil, and the gay parade, and the support of the French government. And today we have the support of Karina Subsidi in Brazilian Sign Language and Prisma in the language translation. Today with me I have Matt Morris, the commercial manager of the Canadian consulate in Seattle, and the first work that is transgender in the foreign exchange. Rafael Pagotto, Secretary of the Forum of the Companies and the Right LGBTIA+, Carolina Robledo, Director of Ariana NGA for the Lesbian NGO, and the activist transgender. And unfortunately, Elizabeth Moreno, the Minister responsible for equality of men and women, diversity, and opportunities in France cannot make it due to other commitments. So welcome. And then I will start approaching the lack of opportunities for LGBT people in the workplace. According to the study of the National Associations of Travesti and Transgender in 2029% of travesti in Brazil are in prostitution. Just 6% have formal work. And according to the consultancy Santo Carlos, 38% of the Brazilian companies do not hire LGBT. How can we change this reality? Please, Rafael, the floor is yours. You start. Hi, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here in a forum that is so important, that has to do with some spheres and many agents of transformation here in Brazil and worldwide, of a community that is organized around human rights. Yesterday we had May 17th, so important historically for the community and the world, to tell the world that we are not sick, we are not invisible, and we are part of the society. And I am Rafa Pagotto, representing, as Fabian said, the Forum of Companies and LGBT Rights. Let me introduce myself. I am a white man in questioning my gender and currently as a gay person. My background is blurry, not to show my room that is so messy. And I'm wearing a blazer, a coat. It's so cold here in São Paulo. I have gloves with my fingers out so I can type in. And I have beard, I'm a white, and I have a kind of blonde hair. And it's interesting to talk about employment and how to change this scenario within many contexts, that I especially bring the company context, that is the one that opened doors to companies. The Forum of Companies is a movement that started 9 years ago, and now we have more and more people. Every day we have more companies and corporations coming in, national and international ones, articulating around two verbs that are very important. One is respect. And when we talk about respect, we talk about at least the companies considering diversity in their organizations, diversity as human beings. And then we seek diversity in representative of LGBT community inside organizations and fostering. And we talk about fostering. We have an extra step that is to include LGBT people inside corporations, and considering essentially that we are talking about human rights. We are talking about social benefits, not this necessarily, it's part of it. We are talking about human dignity to fight and eradicate LGBT phobia out of the work relationship and have a permanent communication with the government, society, social movements, all these agents. So how can we change this reality? It really depends on many factors, but companies essentially, the existing of this forum is about three aspects. One is improve the management practices, because that's the way we are going to break this barrier of the invisibility that the LGBT community face inside companies, inside society. When we talk about society, we talk about employment. When we talk about employment, I'd like to remind you the prerogative of the International Labour Organization in the Convention 111, saying that employment is basically two aspects: the access to workplace, and we are talking about more than curriculum, more than opening doors, is the access depends on visible and invisible barriers and conditions of work, conditions of staying at work, of developing at work. And in this sense, the practice, the company management create policies and processes that are clear. In affirmative actions will ensure that. Make us to eradicate LGBT phobia at workplace. It's more than fighting it, we need to eliminate, because it's not good for people, it's not good for business, it's not good for society. And finally, we burst the bubbles as we are doing here, not talking this inside the closed doors, inside companies. We listen what the community has to say, listen to social movements, the government, the organizations, so we can advance faster, facing so many barriers that we have seen. According to the indicators, and these indicators that are not a reflection necessarily of the reality of Brazil. We have different realities here in Brazil, and we need to fight the stigmas. The stigmas also that bring these numbers. Perfect, Rafael. Thank you so much. Just to remind you, when you are about to finish your time, I will raise my hand so you can see that your time is up. Alejandra, welcome. You can talk about it, please. It is very important that we have laws to reflect the laws
Pessoas, como a gente está com problema?
We have a problem with Alejandra's internet. I will ask Maddie, please, can you answer this aspect, please? Your point of view.
Sure. So I think the question was how to change this reality. And in order to change that reality, specifically on the transgender part of the question, I think it is important to understand the context which creates it. In my eyes, there are two root causes. First, medical cost. Out-of-pocket medical cost to transition in the United States can easily cost over $100,000 US. That puts the cost of transitioning out of reach for a vast majority of transgender folks in the US. Anecdotally speaking, I have not met a single transgender woman that at one point hasn't had to make a difficult decision on how they will survive. It's a choice of whether you will eat or have a doctor's appointment, whether we can have a family or receive the medical support that we need. So to fix this element of the problem, all aspects of care related to the treatment of gender dysphoria need to be considered medically necessary. No person should be put in a position where the only way to afford medical care is by selling themselves. The burden of the cost of treatments should not lie with members of my community just for being born this way. I think the second reason is discrimination in the workplace. When employers won't hire you, sex work becomes the only option. Though many states in the United States have legal protections in place to prevent overt workplace discrimination based on gender, in many small and medium-sized businesses, prejudice and discrimination can come in the way of being offered a job. Many people who have never met us are scared of us. They're scared to hire us just because we're different. The solution to this is education. In a time where politicians around the world, including here in the United States, are trying to make it more difficult to learn about what it means to be transgender, to be a part of the LGBT community, we should be teaching more people about what it means to be transgender, what it means to be LGBT, to teach people that we are not something to be feared, that we are just like everyone else, and dare I say it, we're wonderful workers and colleagues.
Sensacional. Muito obrigado, Medi.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Medi. Carolina, your turn, please.
¿Qué tal? Buenos días.
Hi, how are you? Good morning.
Sí. Bueno, antes que nada, yo quisiera.
So, before starting, I would like to contextualize that I am from Paraguay. Paraguay is a country in this forum. People here, we have a disadvantage as a country in the sense that in Paraguay there are no laws. There are no laws criminalizing our favor. There is no law against discrimination, gender identity. So getting married is impossible. And it's hard when we do not have support on the legislation. The organizations are present and they work so hard, especially we say that in this country, we have to be creative so we can get some solution to what people need. And I think that when there is no acknowledgement, no recognition, that's very complicated to provide the solution, to provide support that people need, especially they getting closer to organizations, and many people also get silent. Anyway, it is necessary to have political will. For example, the new public defender had a protocol of attention for LGBT people. That is a process with public prosecutors, and the organization that I belong, we provide training sessions about this topic, about discrimination. And in this context, we talked about different aspects, more intimate aspects, like the same language. We have to know people. People have to know us and know who we are. And this starts from this point, because otherwise we do not have an egalitarian participation in this country. That's why we need this political willing. It doesn't matter if there are laws or not, but we can start from this point. The ones that are in the power position, they can really do something. It doesn't matter if it's comply with the law or not, because the social reality cannot hide it anymore. But a simple protocol can also enable us to access not discriminatory people, different spaces, like this topic that is employment, because there is labor discrimination in LGBT. But I will talk about it next questions because this is related to Paraguay.
Muito obrigado, Carolina.
Thank you so much, Carolina. Alejandra, please, can you give us your contribution? We're looking forward to hearing from you. Yes? I'm sorry, can you repeat your question, please, sir? Of course. Let me get... According to the study of transvestite and transgender, 30% of the transgender people are in prostitution. And according to Santo Caos Consulting Company, 38% of the Brazilian companies do not hire LGBT population. How do you think we can change this reality? I believe this topic is like in Argentina, and it's about political will, and this is institutionalized already. The public employment is occupied already. And this topic, when you see political change, I believe we are going to see a solution. The government with Bolsonaro currently, it seems so difficult, but I am optimist. I believe that people are tired of it already, of him, of Bolsonaro. And here in Canada is like it could be people are liberal in the way they live. At least here in Toronto, where I live, the small towns, as we call, I believe everything is different. When you go to small towns, we have more prejudice, people are more conservative. And also the topic that lots of conservative people, they are susceptible to the working class because there are politicians that give fear. They do not understand well, so they transmit fear. So when people see what's really going on, that's my opinion. Maybe I am wrong or I'm not, I don't know. I believe that it's very important. Bring this visibility in, present yourselves, and be everywhere, be always present everywhere. Do not be afraid, let's put it this way, and try to introduce yourselves the best way possible, because you can see, like a friend of mine in Argentina, you are treated well. So sometimes a person has prejudice and say, everybody's like you, everybody's that way, you know? So we have to introduce yourself and show yourself, especially if you want the possibility of being visible. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contribution. I have one more question. We have one more topic here. Why do you believe that many companies see as a taboo when they hire people that are LGBT, openly LGBT? The government, the company, civil entities, how they can work and access work for these people? Maddie, can you start, please?
Hi, yes. So as an openly transgender trade commissioner representing the government of Canada's interests here in the United States, my existence was almost unthinkable 20 years ago. But here I am. I am here because members of the gay, lesbian, and bisexual communities that came before me opened the door. Because of them, the government of Canada has not only accepted me, but embraced me, a child from rural South Carolina, as an example of Canadian values. I am lucky. The government of Canada realized that things that make us different, our diversity of opinion, is oftentimes the source of our greatest strength. So the government of Canada now attempts to prioritize diverse communities throughout its decision-making processes and operations, something that all organizations should seek to do. As an example, the department I work for, the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service, brings delegations of LGBT-owned and operated business leaders into the United States to meet with potential partners in the United States. We'll be welcoming a delegation to the city of Seattle this fall. Last week, I spoke with a classroom of 10-year-olds. They were doing an assignment on how do we end transphobia. I told them two things: education and being a good friend. I don't think the answer to that question changes regardless of the age of the listener. We need non-LGBT leaders to champion our cause. We need established leaders in government, in business, in civil entities from outside the LGBT community to be good friends to those of us who are in it. Taboos can't be changed by one person. It takes an entire community. But having senior leaders in business and in government creating policies and then enforcing those policies can go a long way to make sure that members of the LGBT community are hired, are not discriminated against, and feel safe at work.
Excelente. Muito obrigado. Carolina.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Carolina, your turn, please. I think that, first of all, there is also lots of prejudice around it and lack of knowledge of people. Let's say, since childhood, LGBT people build up mechanisms of defense because of the discrimination they suffer. And I believe that later on, this has a high cost for them. In Paraguay, especially, the conservative right wing takes the big companies on, and we have fundamentalist sectors, so that's harder, especially at this point that we live and we have a government that is very far right, very conservative, deny there is discrimination against LGBT community. And this has been going on in the final 3 terms of this government. There is a labor scarcity in Paraguay, not only LGBT community, the companies do this way because they have a support from the government, like working hours. That is a classist point of view of using young people. And then we also see other kind of discrimination, gay, lesbian, trans. But I believe that the governments and the companies, first of all, they must understand that there is a limit of the potential of people, and there is a limit of productivity as well. They cannot produce the same. So we lose the power of company, we lose people. The same in Paraguay, that is a different phenomenon. We do not have laws, as I mentioned before, but we have most of the times this will of doing something. And I will give you an example. Last year, there was an initiative of the company sector, companies of telephone, very known here, and they invited to a working place organizations LGBT. So it seems there is an important point here to us for the organizations, because this initiative is born from a company proposing working together, and we say this is what's going on and what can we change about it. So there was an important overview, and we could talk about what we have seen in other countries as legislation, and what we can change at a local level. What can we do as organizations? And the recommendation for their company to be discrimination-free. I believe that for us, at least in Paraguay, it's a step. We do not have legislation supporting it, but we can advance with people in a different way. So I believe that this point of view we can also use inside companies. The companies that do not know, they can relate to the LGBT organizations, because we have ideas, we have clear ideas about this topic, because we experience this on a daily basis. Perfect. Thank you so much, Carolina. Rafael, please, your contribution. Taboo, this word's very strong because it represents a reflection of fear. When we talk LGBT plus phobia, this fear of unknown. And I think that there is this topic about companies. When we hear political willing, it's interesting to know that these challenges are so many in different parts of the world. But when there is this political will, and it's inside the companies as well, in the leadership of these companies, and you see companies that take up as a reference, and the companies start exercising what's new for them, but good that we have this advocacy of taking up a place and say no to discrimination. And recently, now, in this forum, we launched yesterday a manifesto in our committee of presidents, and they take up the advocacy of human rights, reinforcing the commitment of a work agenda that advances, and that's good for the sector in general, because when we fight taboo, when these big companies tell their value chain that diversity is a wealthy, is not a problem, it's not faced as a risk, just a risk. And most companies, most sectors of society understand LGBT community just as a community that is marginal, aside, a community that is inferior, that is abnormal, that has no competences. But in fact, when we talk about employment, we are talking about competences. There are multiple competences. We need to see LGBT community that is more active, pay their taxes, study. They are ready and prepared to start and collaborate with the teams at companies and start appreciating their stories on leadership that are LGBT. Few, but we have some references, inspiring, bringing hope. And this way we can fight taboos that we are not just LGBT people, but we are LGBT people, give us power to all the other things that we also are professionals, dedicated, we contribute to companies, generating profit, resource. And in this sense, the companies that see this and appreciate this, they are gaining, they are profiting, and they are improving society. So I believe when we think and fight taboos, we bring the status that the wealth that diversity brings, not just the understanding that is retrograde, that we are a problem. Hiring LGBT people is just a matter of social responsibility. We are talking about citizenship. We are talking about power. We are talking about diverse teams, cohesion in society, in companies that know how to make business in the 21st century. So when we change this discourse is very important, and bring the practice of discourse is even more important. Excellent. Thank you so much, Rafael. Alejandra, please. And it's also important we have access to education without discrimination. So trans people do not work because of bullying, and this way the companies, as I mentioned before, in Argentina, we have 1% of job openings, also capacitation in this area, and this is very important. I live in a generation that 30 years, 40 years ago, the word trans did not exist back then, not even as a concept. So I can say that the evolution, especially in the latest years, to me happened. I see this was already going on in Argentina, trans and gay in 2012, then in Canada in 2017. And these were the two laws with the strong political impact. In Argentina, it was Kirchner government, and in Canada. And before, there was this attempt of passing a law that went to the House of Representatives, and it was denied by the senators that was there, did not pass. They call it the law of the toilet. Up to Trudeau went to the House of Representatives and convinced these congressmen that did not want to pass the law to pass this law anyway. Because before there were laws that were not, it was just conveniences. For example, the airport. I know that you have experienced this in the USA 3 or 4 years ago. They face the same problem. They have to pass a scanner at the airport. They have to be taken to a special private area, and they are asked things, you know. For me, these laws are important to prevent this kind of scenes. It was like this in Argentina, and long live Canada and Argentina, these two countries that are in the forefront of the human rights for the trans people. You are right, excellent. And it's amazing. This panel is amazing. Today is a spectacular day. The pandemic, COVID-19, we have to mention it anyway. COVID-19 pandemic has reached especially strongly the LGBT community, with bring an impact, the reduction of the job opportunities in this population. What is the message that you can take companies that are trying to help when the economic return after COVID. We are going to start with Alejandra, please. These companies that they are hiring trans people, people that will bring job opportunities. That we see very often conservative policies in these companies, ruling the companies, they are afraid. There is this fear, and it's a fear aspect. And now there is also this aspect of the far right, Agustin Lajes, for example, and other players. They are dangerous people, and they want to get back to 1990s. They want to get back to 1950s. Don't even give space to women anymore, you know? So they want women to stay home, taking care of children, and being a housewife. So this topic, when you fight for everything that we have achieved, we have to stay firm, never step back. And for me, it's very important that we keep on moving ahead in all this movement, because now when there is a counterattack in the USA, for example, that it seems that in the Trump administration, it was something like this. It was revenge, that everything that was against him. So we need to be, we need the antibodies to resist, you know, to have the antibodies to resist. That's perfect. Thank you so much, Alejandra. Carolina, please. Really, the pandemic has hit very strongly in this country as well. We were not ready with the health aspect to be hit by the pandemic. No government was ready for that. 7 million of people, more than 300,000 people lost their jobs. And I have a line of service, of attention. I can listen to you. That's the name of the service that we offer in my organization. And we see cases of discrimination, different cases of discrimination against LGBT community, gender expression, sex orientation, and they were fired without justification. LGBT people in general, the pandemic, they were fired. The justification was the economic situation because of the pandemic. And let's say that Paraguay, I do not know companies that are right now trying to collaborate with LGBT people because of the pandemic. There were funds, emergency funds, these funds that collaborate with the organizations, funds that they support organizations. But anyway, currently the companies they have empathy, not in this point of view of charity, but see the other person as an equal one. Because LGBT, we know that there are some job occupations that they do not place with LGBT people. they put us in some occupations. One occupations, yes, other occupations, no. So this point of view is very important. We need to share and fight stereotypes and prejudice against the workers in LGBT population, that the occupations and workplace, they are progressist and they apply favorable policies to diversity as part of their framework to foster equality and diversity of all the people. So this course based on human rights and equality is not based on charity. I'm doing you a favor, no, but I'm giving you, but I have something back as well. It's something, is equal from equal to equal. That's the pathway, and that's the takeaway message.
Excelente, muito obrigado.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Carolina, Med, your turn, please.
If your business is looking to help, then I would recommend hiring someone who is LGBT. While I hate to generalize, I would say that LGBT folks make wonderful employees. More often than not, I have found members of our community to be empathetic, hardworking, and great at communications. We are driven, we are resourceful, we've had to be. The challenges and discrimination that LGBT folks face make them strong members of the workforce. So more than just promoting equality, hire someone who is a member of the LGBT community because they will make your organization better. LGBT folks want to be a part of the solution of rebuilding the global economy after COVID. And we have a valuable life outlook that can really be an important part of that solution.
Excelente, muito obrigado.
Excellent, thank you so much. Rafael, please. So we experience a scenario that rocked the structures as human beings, the way we relate to people, the way we make businesses. And yes, in fact, the community, the inequalities, the addition of inequalities that we face are here stronger with COVID. In the forum, we talked about a company that wants to have the prerogatives to not open the doors and does not do anything, but I hire people, I hire them. I have a space for all people here. But if the companies, in fact, do not seek LGBT people, understanding that in order to have equality relationship, we need to have equity actions, and this means when we talk about recruiting and selection, thinking that the community has capacity, competences, and power to be part of the company, but some other people do not have, especially the people in a vulnerable situation. So I always need to create actions and special programs according to specific needs, not just think that if I open the doors of the company, the community will be here. Because the other day, last week, I was at a meeting talking about refugee situations that are also LGBT people, listening to stories in the northern area of the country, people who work directly with LGBT people in extreme vulnerable situation and also as a refugee situation. And these people do not knock at the company's door because they do not feel able. They do not think that the company is a place for them to be. So the companies that want to create programs on diversity, the companies need to think about their situation as well. Understand that there is this person in extreme vulnerable situation. You also have a higher leadership that is not out of the closet, afraid of losing the job. They stay 10 years in the same occupation because they do not have opportunity of developing in another position because they are not trusted. The LGBT professional is not trusted for any reason. We know that it has nothing to do with competence, but we have the prejudice aspect. So the company needs to see their overall scenario. They need to hire, they need to seek, they need to create development actions. They need to think about the health because in a holistic way, because COVID has got us so well. People got back to their closets when they got back living with their families, thinking about trans people, and we have trans people here understanding that. We have data in Brazil that say that a trans person that lose their job, they cannot survive because they do not have the power of the community. They are isolated. They don't have the support of the community. So you need affinity groups inside companies to give these people the sense of belonging. They are going to feel strong, not economically, but in the social emotional aspect. So the company needs to think about the human integrality if they want to hire, if they want to keep, if they want to develop LGBT people. But the premise is it's not hard and it's not radical as it is in the UN guidelines so people can read it. We are talking about the extension of rights, the extension of opportunities, understanding that we LGBT people, we are still so far away from accessing and having opportunities as people considered normal. There are different ways of working at the social aspect and also professional development aspect. But you have to start companies, start. Excellent. And it's important to remember that it's not assistential, it's a work relationship, and you have to be qualified to work together. And I totally agree with the idea. Yes, we need companies that are qualified for our population because we deserve the same respect that the company wants, any person wants. That is, in addition to this universal problem, we see more topics and more questions that are more present. One of them is the professional qualification led by a low school level and technical qualification. How can you think about the role of the government and civil entities to help these people to improve these technical competences, these skills to meet the market demands, for example? And then I'd like to ask Mehdi to start, please.
Most major cities and regions in the US and Canada have LGBT Chamber of Commerces or similar community organizations led by LGBT folks that offer things like training, job boards, and wider business opportunities for LGBT-led companies and LGBT workers in their region. I have found that more often than not, these organizations are wonderful starting points, whether you are a representative of a government entity or a representative of a business to partner with, whether it be on a specific skills training program or some other workshop oriented towards supporting the LGBT community in the workplace. It takes a team effort, it takes partnerships, it takes bringing our various skill sets and organizations and resources together to create programs that can give LGBT folks the skills that they need to get the jobs they need to live the lives that they want to live.
Excelente, obrigado, Medi.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Medi Rafael. I remember right now of some initiatives of companies. The companies, they talk about employment, LGBT, with this point of view that is broader. In addition to social responsibility, we are not talking about the need of representativity, of having these bodies inside of the company, but we want these people to develop themselves. They extend their potential, their skill and competence to helping their business, to having business better, so they can develop themselves. When we talk about qualification programs, we need to understand that there are some things that the companies can do when we talk about employment, especially understand that it's not all the occupation that is good for everybody. You just not help with volunteer actions to improve the curriculum of a person that needs to have professional experience, and they do not have space in companies for that. To understand that people have different skills and competences, and it is necessary to listen to them and provide them conditions to see this person as a holistic person. So to understand if the person can be at that occupation, as I said, physical and mental health is important from the point that they are inside of the company. How you're going to keep that person, what is the safety net and support that they are going to need. We talk about qualification, educational aspect of the company, not only thinking about training sessions and qualification courses as mandatory, so people need to understand what is LGBT people, what it means, the acronym. What is my role as an educator throughout the process to make it easier, all the relationship, so that person, from the point that they are inside of the company, they are really included, they can contribute, they have this sense of belonging to the point that they can really develop themselves, observe their lives, their surroundings. Do they have financial conditions? For trans people in vulnerable situations, the first months are very complicated. People that not necessarily are inside of the codes of the company, it's the first formal work for many of them. Is there a follow-up? Is there a support? When we think about benefits, the company needs to be qualified as well. Trans hormone needs, transition needs for trans people, and everything that has to do with the family LGBT. When the company thinks about benefit, observe the aspect in a holistic way is important, not only qualification aspects, thinking if this qualification also meets the requirement of the company, and a permanence, a continuity. So LGBT people can also be multipliers, not just unique. They are going to be multipliers. They are not unique in a sector. They are part of a sector, part of a space, to say that we have LGBT people just because of advertising. No, but bring this with efficacy. They have many pillars and many processes on qualification. It's a great journey of learning, I believe, for a company. Perfect. Thank you, Rafael. Carolina, please. Yes, following in this same line, I believe that it is necessary a higher understanding of what is discrimination, what LGBT people face. Discrimination at school life, for all the school life, from teachers, from other students, the principal, also inside their family. So this is also a restriction for the potential development in educational level, generating low self-esteem, anxiety, and this also hinders the job opportunities later on. So in Paraguay, there is a free group that the state provides. They are very good and they have this qualification, but the problem is before that. The educational system expel LGBT people from the school system because of the discrimination there is there. So in general, that is one exception, and it's very hard later on to access job opportunities without school background. So it's rooted most of the times in having a lower salary, a higher probability of being harassed and receive unfair treatment at work. So I said in the beginning that last year, the sectors of companies accepted LGBT organizations. So we had a chance to talk to them about everything that is going on. And one of the topics that we bring was we need to provide qualification courses constantly, enabling that the employees that are ready at workplace, trans people, it's harder for them. They could also be open about their sex orientation, and it has to do with performance. And this is also part of people having work satisfaction, not to be pressed under pressure all the time and hiding something and because it's different, but also it is something they need to understand, especially the companies need to understand that. And provide qualification courses, not only the companies that want to hire people, trans, LGBT, most of the times, but sometimes. But later on, they need to understand this aspect of school evasion, not because people want, but because there is a constant discrimination that school system expelling people outside school. So it is necessary an understanding, especially the government side. It is necessary a structural change, especially in Paraguay at educational level. So we can also include people that are excluded. That's what's going on. People are excluded. So I have the hope that some sectors of companies could be the ones that will change. Not all of them, but the smaller ones that are really willing to include people LGBT. And I believe this is a joint work with the organizations. So this could be the way, especially here in Paraguay. Perfect. Thank you so much, Carolina. Alejandra, please. We need political will. We need education. So restricted and also have educational access, bringing qualifications so they can work later. Taking up occupations, the companies must be open to welcome the LGBT community and provide the necessary training so they can perform well at the company. That's why that I say there is a package. There is not a single concept, not even just equality. We need a full package of concept. And that's the way we need to do it. That's perfect. Thank you so much, Alejandra. Thank you. In addition to this moment when we talk about not having qualification, you have mentioned during the debate, even when there is qualification, technical competence, most of the LGBT professionals face homophobia. They are prevented from advancing in a career as an extension of the corporate glass ceiling. What are the challenges we still need to face to have these companies more inclusive? How can this company change? Carolina, please.
Sí, yo creo que
I believe that there are companies that have discrimination policies, but in reality, in theory, is not so real.
En la teoría o en el
the theory and the regulation, they talk about non-discrimination, but we need this awareness in the workplace. I believe there is a challenge for companies and the state governments. This awareness is not that we are going to include. For so long, we have gays and we have lesbians, we have trans people, LGBT people in many, many places, in many, many companies, and they do not feel pleased there. So that is a challenge that the companies face, and also is a fight for all the human beings, not only this collective. I want this to be, that my company is pleasant to all the people, not just for some communities, but this is the policy of the company, the organization and the state level. I believe that is part of their strategies, not just simple actions, punctual actions. I believe the challenge is that the companies have zero tolerance to LGBT phobia, to say, no, they are just joking, no, it's not serious, do not feel bad about it. I do not mean that is a joke, and people, it's not severe, but they feel bad about it. So we have to start from zero tolerance. I believe if the companies do not know how to approach, they need to hire organizations, LGBT, to design a working plan and also a follow-up plan. And I used to say that in theory, they have a non-discrimination policy, but not in practice, because the language has a power, a very big power, but people have to give importance to it. You can do more for people, changing the way we speak, the way you approach people, and instead of talking, you support, and then inside the company, you are harassing the lesbian colleague or the gay employee. And I believe that one of the main reasons also of people getting silent is like this. If I say something, people think that you can change the professional value of a person. So a challenge is that the person can feel that they belong to that workplace. and they do not feel unpleasant there. So there is this need to emphasize with people, and language has a very big power. I think that the challenge is right there. You need this awareness, a real awareness that we need to use it at the workplace. People can feel well, they can feel unsafe. That is also the problem. One of the cases that I have seen, for example, in a company, they hired a trans person, but then there was a problem with their workmates because of the toilet use at the company. That's why we need a real inclusion policy, neutral toilet places. In the end, this person was fired of the work, and there is no justification, you know. There is no personal record. That's why they have to leave, because there's no experience. We know LGBT people. It's LGBT, that's the real cause. So there are many things that we can do. There's no need to have a big budget for that. Carolina, thank you so much. Maddie, please.
I've worked most of my career representing government entities to private sector companies in the advanced engineering sector, a sector that in the US is not considered to be the most progressive of sectors. The first time I went to a conference as myself, as Maddie, I was asked 4 times, "What got you interested in this field?" Something I had never been asked once when I was presenting as a white male. People have preconceived notions of what it means to be a straight white man, of what it means to be transgender, of what it means to be LGBT. That is always with them, inside and outside the workplace. We need to change hearts and minds. Outside the workplace, we need to see more queer superheroes and princesses. We need to read books with LGBT main characters. We need to see transgender women on film and in television that aren't the punchline to a joke or a medical anomaly. In the workplace, we need to see more LGBT leaders. We need to see more non-LGBT senior leadership in organizations supporting their LGBT colleagues. We need organizations to adopt policies that ensure LGBT workers do not face discrimination while at work, especially around bathrooms. We need to remove discrimination from the hiring and the interview process. We need to create workplace cultures where people feel safe to speak up when they see bullying and harassment. Managers need to protect LGBT workers. All this to say, we need every person to pitch in and to do their part to make sure that policies are observed. It can't just be LGBT folks. It needs to be everyone in an organization, and it needs to be everyone.
Excelente, muito obrigado.
Excellent, thank you so much. Rafael, please. I was muted. You know, we live in a world where the structures need to be destructured. There is no other way of talking about racism, structural racism, if we do not include white people in this conversation as well. If just Black people talk about racism, we need to talk about feminism. If the conversation is just among women, we do not invite men in. We cannot talk about structural homophobia if we do not bring cis people in, the allies, if we do not bring the straight people in, and we are just inside our bubble. We need to have this conversation that is cross, more humane, and this conversation inside companies is part of their working agenda. In the forum, we propose the existence of a working agenda called 10 commitments. And these commitments, they are indicators of performance. The companies that are willing to work for the LGBT community, fostering rights and respect, they take up these 10 commitments and their guidance. These 10 commitments talk about the commitment of leadership, and then we are talking about practical commitment, practical actions of having representatives talking on behalf of diversity. We are structuring affinity groups and bringing sense of belonging, and these groups have a strategic role, not only inside their bubbles, feel comfortable, but also they are challenged to interfere in the policies of the company, help the company to be better. We are talking about corporate education policies, practical policies that leave the administrative centers, reaching operations, changing the relationship among people. We are talking about marketing, communication, how the company represents the LGBT bodies, how can the company develop products and services, considering the LGBT community as the target audience, combating stigmas. We are talking about social responsibility actions to fight the structural homophobia and consider the population in their inclusion policies, relationship with all the audiences, talking about suppliers, third-party relationship, how can the company take diversity to the suppliers and vendors. Everything translates an agenda of work that has to be practical. What is a safe environment for all people? This includes also human resources policies in the recruiting process, development process, and the firing process. But everything, if we do not have this willing to have allies that are so important for the LGBT community. Yes, we are talking about the men, white man leaders, cis, straight, that needs to be part and together with us, not because of they are guilty, but we can work to generate collective responsibility on diversity, because it's not just me and them. There is no separation. There is no separation because diversity is something that belongs to everybody. So I would like to highlight we need a practical working agenda with allies with us, because that's how we are going to change these structures. That's perfect. Thank you so much, Rafael. Alejandra. And it's very important, the possibility to understand and change these movements. So we do not see discrimination. And we mentioned this before, education aspect, to make it normal LGBT, and it's important. The presentation on TV, in the media, radio, written press, everything. Everything is more normatized. As Maddie mentioned before, now we see trans superheroes. That's why it's very important And it's not something wrong, it's something positive. And it's very important to create a positive language. People that can present themselves and they are going to be viewed. And that's why we should be very careful with what we do and with what we say. What we speak will reflect in a positive or negative way in our community about the other communities. And that's why it is very important, all this topic. I love to speak about how hard it is to be a trans person. For example, people must understand that people have their condition and they need support to take life ahead. We must observe all these rules and not damage people around us at the labor space and outside it as well. I may be wrong, but that's my point of view. Excellent, Alejandra, excellent. That is very good to listen to you all. It's very good to bring up this conversation. We have some questions selected during this wonderful roundtable that we are bringing here. And then I will read the first question that is like this. Today, people demand from companies and brands a social responsibility that is higher than years ago. Do you believe that is the role of the company to apply inclusion policies, even if the society and the government in that country is against the inclusion or diversity? And I ask Rafael, please, can you start answering this question? The companies, unfortunately, in the absence of public policies, we have companies now that take up a role of understanding human rights for all the people. And the companies are part of the problem. They are not perfect. We know that they also reproduce the same inequalities in the society. But when they want to make business today, to all the audience, meeting all the demands, because they do not survive without the consumers, they also take up the responsibility to do the right thing. And it's also doing the right thing is good for business. The companies have this agenda. They call ESG agenda at the companies. What is the SG? All the companies want to have, and in Brazil we say ASG because environment in Brazil starts with an A, the governance aspect and social aspect, everything together mixed. There is no separation anymore. The company to work well and live long, they need to observe everything, not only the labor force and people in general, holistically being who they are so they can deliver their full potential. And it's good that the companies take up these spaces here in Brazil, especially here, as I mentioned, with this manifesto, and we are having a CEO groups getting together on the 20th May in a big office, Machado Meyer law firm, a big one here in São Paulo, with an important point of view in this conversation, that is this. We, companies, are not stepping back in our attitudes, in our practices. It doesn't matter the political scenario that we are going to have this year, because we have election years here in Brazil. So this is a landmark, a very important landmark. I believe I have been in the forum for 6 years as a secretary for 2 years. If we observe 6 years ago, we did not have companies stepping up like this, talking about human rights and not even putting their logos on LinkedIn with this. We have many. If the company cannot survive just waving the flag, they have to take up responsibility in the society, and the consumers will demand from them. And it's good. It's not isolated anymore. But it's not enough. The company, it's important to say that the public policies are necessary, the social movements are paramount, and we need to do this together.
Perfeito, obrigado, Rafael.
Perfect, thank you so much, Rafael. Alejandra, please. Everything is important. The sound is not so good. The interpreters are sorry.
Tratando siempre de brindar la mejor imagen posible. Y también, por ejemplo,
we try to reproduce the best image possible. And what I saw when I was in Buenos Aires between December and March,
para cambiar, yo había años atrás veterinario en Argentina y ahora quiero.
And all the documents.
Eso también es una cosa importante. Mi inspiración fue un.
We can do this in Argentina. That is a trans engineer that changed. I wanted to do that. I could see, and it's possible.
Que no hay nada malo, de todo, o sea, la norma.
And people see there's nothing wrong. The normatization of all these processes. 40 years ago, this was a dream. To have a surgery, for example, was something out of this world. It was not possible. They were not granted by the government. It was $50,000. And just a small sector that had a big economic power could access. Most part of the population did not have all the instruments. That's why it's very important that all these countries bear in mind the possibility of changing document of a person at the labor sector, at the school system. And this to me is very, very important. We are just in the beginning. I would like to see 30 years, 40 years from now, if we support everything. So everything happens, everything is going to be much better. The thing is that there are sectors still that are reactive, supporting with all this retrograde, this old system, and we have to be aware of that. Otherwise, we are moving backwards. That's why it's important not to step back ever.
Maravilhoso, muito obrigado, Alejandra. Carolina.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. Carolina, please.
Sí, yo creo que hay,
I believe that
que hay un cambio de
there is a change of awareness in the society, the working awareness, and it's connected to all these movements. As Alejandra said, 40 years ago, we did not see this, but 40 years ago, there was already organizations and movements starting up these discussions, and I believe that this is a new stage, a new generation, this generation that complain is not silent anymore. And I believe that it has to do with this awareness that there is now about the working space, connected as well with all the movements that came before. I have an example that happened here months ago, and a gay boy, complained about discrimination at a company, very non-company, household appliances company. In all the social media, it came viral, and the company was obligated to explain, justify themselves. This did not happen before, and this happened. We need to know that the companies they are not going to be bashed. They have to explain themselves. We need to do something so this never happens again. But whatever reason there is a change. We see a change. We need to talk about it. We need to value this. And it's connected to this aspect, this new generation is not silent anymore. Generations like mine, prior to me, we suffered repression, we were afraid, we were hidden, but I believe that this is different now. I believe that this fear to complain and to be bashed, it's working. So we have to complain always, always. And especially, I believe that we have changed, especially in this country, that is a conservative country. People are motivated of going out. I do not know if this happens in your countries, but here we have places when we have people like this. The lesbian are hand in hand. This is complained more than ever. And the companies and these places are bashed. People, places that close their doors because people complain about them. Perfect. Thank you so much, Karina. Mehdi, please.
In the US and in Canada, more and more companies are seeing that promoting human rights and promoting equality is good for business. People want to spend their money with brands that are a part of the future, that are a part of creating inclusive communities. And we're seeing Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies such as T-Mobile, Boeing, Starbucks, completely reviewing their ESG requirements top down. We're seeing hiring of leaders in diversity, equity, inclusion, ESG, et cetera, to make sure that these companies are making the changes, spending the money, making the investments on changing every facet of their operations to make sure that they are a part of this more inclusive future. So it's, it's on all of us to, I guess, continue supporting, making sure that we use our dollars with companies, with organizations that are protective of our community.
Perfeito, muito obrigado.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mehdi. I have one more question.
Foi feita pelas pessoas.
Sent by people. Today, people that are afraid of taking up and in their workplaces. Do you believe if you are in the closet will help to bring prejudice forever in the companies? These people should come out and open up spaces of dialogues at their workplaces. I will start this complicated question by Mehdi, please.
Thanks for starting on me for the complicated question. You know, I think there's a real delicate balance that needs to be struck. We can't expect LGBT folks to always lead on the conversation. We can't always be the one answering the questions. We can't always be the one providing the information. So I don't think any LGBT person should feel like they are required to do this, particularly if you're in a company or organization where perhaps maybe you don't feel safe or you don't feel supported. But at least for me, I can say that since I openly transitioned, I've taken every opportunity I can to speak, to inform, to educate, to be visible, to be public, to answer questions, because it's my hope that as the generation before me has done for me, I can do for the generation below me. And that is an obligation that I hold very personally near and dear. And I hope that others out there that have the same privilege that I do are able to make those comments, to provide that education, and to stick up for those of us that maybe don't have as much privilege.
Muito obrigado, Mehdi.
Thank you so much, Mehdi. Carolina, please.
Bueno, en Paraguay,
In Paraguay,
es motivo de expulsión, digamos, los trabajos, es motivo de pérdida.
it's a reason
Es muy difícil
of
que las
losing
personas sean abiertas.
people when they come up.
Porcentaje, digamos, de
Is there a very small percentage of people that can have this right and feel this way and come up and say they are LGBT?
Yo creo que también
And I believe that this is also have to do with the personal aspect that people, if they want to say if they want, if they do not want, they must not feel obliged. And this should be in the workplace and everything that we mentioned before. We need a safe environment for them. And I feel safe enough to say this, to come up. Here in Paraguay, we do not have this space anymore. It's a long way, this inclusion, because people do not understand when they are joking, you know, and the other person can feel bad about it, unpleasant. So if there is no safe environment, so I feel safe enough, I hardly talk about something that bothers me so much, bother people so much. And I think that this is, in my generation, people, we live in a different time, and it's so hard. People come out of the closet. Maybe if today, with this new generation, and you were fired from the first, second, and third job. In the first job, you have to say something. So if you have a safe environment, I believe it's something personal. People have to feel safe and come out and speak up. Perfect. Thank you so much, Carolina. Alejandra.
Seu microfone.
Creo que lo que ha dicho Carolina es muy importante.
I think this is very important.
Hacer, digamos, un come out, digamos, en el cual uno se sienta
when people come out and they feel safe. In the case of a country and the LGBT community, and it's difficult to present yourself like this. So every case is totally different. You cannot generalize. And every person, one person is more outgoing, the other is more timid to speak up and to relate with other people. That's why it's very important to see in many countries the person can present themselves according to the situation of every country. Is the self-determination aspect. The person is psychologist in Argentina. And when the person change a name, they need to change documents like passport, for example. I'm so sorry, but the sound is not audible. And the self-determination for some change is also important.
Y eso es una cuestión muy importante. Si no hay defensa legal, va a ser más difícil que la gente se exponga, digamos.
People have to expose themselves.
Por ahí perjudicando su futuro personal y profesional también. Es mi forma de ver. Pero no es necesariamente todo, pero es mi forma de ver las cosas.
Perfeito, muito obrigado.
That's
Alejandra.
perfect. Thank you so much, Alejandra. Rafa, please. I remember my personal story. I need to mention it here because I came out of the closet in some occupation, some job, and I use my example because in two of them, one of them at least, I could not get promoted because I was openly a homosexual person, and another job I was fired by homophobia. I was out of the marketplace for 3 years. And so what I mean is that for some people that like me, I am a white man and I have male traces, the need of political affirmation and come out of the closet also has a price. But for some trans people, or they are effeminated gays or male lesbians, according to the nature, they do not have the choice of come out or do not come out of the closet. Their life is already out of the closet. So in this sense, they naturally pay a high price of being who they are. And of course, I believe we have the two sides of a coin. In some countries and some regions, not only countries, because in Brazil, we have apparently laws to support the community, one of the highest violence crime rate for the LGBT community on the 13th time in a row, the country who kills more transvestite and trans people in the world. Come out of the closet has this facet. On one side, you need in some countries, in some places, preserve your life. And on the other hand, because of some privileges, you have the opportunity to tell the world, to tell people that pride of being who you are is something important. It's something that open your ways, open spaces. Some people are willing to pay that high price. And I remember the trans and transvestite people, the Black people that opened the pathway for a great part of the LGBT community, telling who they are, speaking their minds, talking about rights. And on the other hand, motivate that people that can cross that bridge and pay high prices to tell the world we are not ashamed, we are not wrong, we are proud of being who we are. That's why the companies appreciate October 11th, the day, is the coming out day, the day when you come out of the closet, but this should be something personal. Not all the body is political body, not all the existence is a political existence, but at the same time, the opportunity of taking up this space is liberating for the person and also the society. So it's not yes or no, it's a little bit here, a little bit there, depends on each situation, isn't it? Perfect. Thank you so much, Rafael. Excellent. Wonderful. Participating of this table, listening to you all, your points, your contributions that are so necessary, fundamental. So we can reach to this conclusion that yes, this continuous education, qualification on part of the companies in order to be more and more respectful for the coexistence of people. Yes, they need to become healthy also for the LGBT population. This is very good. The examples that you bring, your reports and your cases are spectacular. I thank you so much, so much. We thank you so much for your participation. I'd like to open up your microphones for your final considerations. And please, let's start with Alejandra. Alejandra, please. Thank you so much for the invitation of participating in this forum. It's been a great pleasure to listen to you all. All the different expressions here. And in reality, this helps us to see better, to know better, and the importance that you are not alone. You're not lonely in this world. 40, 50 years ago, it seems that you were the only one like this. LGBT, there was no prejudice. It was something totally different. And I believe it is also very important. And I see in an optimistic point of view the future. But we are not fine or at ease. We have to keep on fighting because we are important forces. And they want to step us back. They want to put us back. Thank you so much for the opportunity of being here. Thank you so much, Alejandra. Carolina, please, your final considerations. Thank you so much for the invitation to this forum. And it's very important, this topic, January. We do not talk much, and I believe that especially in Paraguay, the change is not so big in the legislation, especially the final government but a society that is advancing in the social reality. And also see here the countries, they have their legislations, there's more advanced than ours. We also have these reflections that are related to what we have of the fight, what we are coming from, where, how we started, and then the situations that are, especially here in this country and other countries, the importance and reflect about this topic and bring here what is like in Paraguay and see what's going on in other countries. This space is so rich, and people that are part of this panel and the topic. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much, Carolina. Rafael, please, your final consideration. Medi, Alejandra, Carolina, and Fabian. Thank God that we exist. Thank God we resist. Thank God we have fought. Thank God we celebrate. And these things need to happen together. So I am so pleased of looking at my personal story, and you also have yours, and knowing that our story today is a channel for hope and transformation wherever we are, wherever we represent the governments, the companies, the communities, and there are my people like ourselves, you listening to us, to keep hopes up. It's possible. We are together. Gender neutral language in Portuguese is not easy, but it's possible. And I really hope that the stories here shared and many, many others in this program of this event can inspire you all to be connected with this network that we represent and other networks, so we can get stronger, they can get stronger. You come to the companies that have their open doors to diversity, accessing the forum websites, companies.lgbt.com, and you can see companies, 149 companies that have diversity policies, diversity programs. They are not perfect, those companies, but they are companies that are willing to make the right thing. So here we are. I'm so pleased of learning from you, listening you, knowing about your reality in your countries, knowing about your pains and also your joys of being who we are, and keeping our dignity that yes, we do deserve better conditions of working, we do deserve decent work, fair work, we deserve access to work and opportunities of development. We are going together, and there is a neutral language in Portuguese. Thank you so much, Rafael. I'm so emotional. I feel emotional with you all here. Medi, please, your final considerations.
No, I mean, you're going to make me emotional. First, thanks for inviting me to be a part of this panel. It's been a real delight to get to share the last 2 hours or so with all of you. We come from different parts of the world, different countries, different policies, different types of companies, different private sector cultures. But what strikes me from this conversation is that all of us are saying the same things. We're all using almost exactly the same words. And it's because our shared experience is real. And that's something that it always has been here, it always will be here. And that will never be erased, regardless of whether our individual country is on the way up or perhaps on a bit of a downtrend in terms of policies and regulations that are inclusive and promote equality for the LGBT community. So more than anything, I come away from this conversation not crying but smiling at the future, that all of us are playing hopefully a very small role in this conversation, and will continue to do so in every subsequent conversation down the road. So thank you.
Muito obrigado, pessoas. Muito
Thank you
obrigado.
so much, you all of you. We are going to conclude this panel. I thank you so much for Melis, Alejandra, Presence, Carolina, and Rafa. And at 2 p.m. BRT, we're having a panel on culture and diversity, the night time. We are talking about cultural spaces, important spaces. Please do not miss the afternoon session. It's going to be live and we are going to be on YouTube as well. Have you all a great afternoon. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Tchau, gente. Até mais.